Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to all this morning. I'm your host Hajra Satti and joining me is my wonderful co-host Fahim Bangesh. Assalamu alaikum Fahim. How are you doing today? I would say on this rainy weather or rainy Thursday in Islamabad.
Well, I'm doing very well. Walaikum assalam. Thank you very much. And you're right, it's a rainy morning. And rainy mornings are considered to be very beautiful except for when they are in the monsoons. I fail to understand why so many romantic songs have been written on the monsoon season, because that happens to be the most moist, the most humid season of all. And I really fail to understand, because obviously whenever we listen to songs, be it the old Pakistani songs or songs from the subcontinent, we see the monsoon season being highlighted like never before. Like, this is the most beautiful and the most comfortable weather there is. But no, it isn't. And slowly and gradually, with the passage of time, we are watching the weather patterns deteriorating, the weather patterns being abnormal. And this is high time that we highlight this issue at every platform, at every program, in every organization and workshops and summits. Whatever we're talking about, this is one thing which needs to be highlighted, because obviously if we don't highlight it now, we're going to regret it in the future. Isn't it, Hajra?
Right, that's very true, and thank you so much for pointing out, two different contrasting literatures also, because in the West, if you find that they eulogize sun a lot, because they hardly get to see the sun that much, right? And in the South Asian literature, like you mentioned about the songs that have been written, or the poetry that have been written, or the verses that have been written, they usually eulogize rain a lot, right? Because we get to see so much scorching sun. But yes, you're definitely right. The accompanying humidity after that rainfall is something that we are definitely not looking for. But I think this is the beauty of South Asian weather patterns, that we get to experience each and every season.
And I think, Hajra, without further ado, we must introduce our guest for today, shall we?
Sure, why not? And obviously we are going to touch upon the topic, that is the pre-monsoons and how they're going to impact when we talk about our lives, our agriculture, and particularly because like Antonio Guterres said in 2022 rainfalls, that these monsoons, they are on the steroids, and we are going to witness a way more intense rainfall this season according to the Met Office, which is 35% more rainfall. So without any further ado, we are very glad that we have been joined by Dr. Rashid Aftab Saab. He is the Director of the Faculty Public Policy at the Rifa University. Assalamu alaikum, sir, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you, Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, now we see the changing weather patterns, we see the abnormalities, and like Hajra very beautifully mentioned, the expression used by Antonio Guterres, that the weather patterns, they seem to be on steroids, the rainfalls, they seem to be on steroids. So what would you say regarding this? Are we to expect flooding and perhaps 50 to 60% more rainfall in the coming years? Because obviously the heat patterns, the rain patterns, they seem to be going haywire.
So instead of romance of the rainfall, I will be talking about the scientific or evidence-based things, what is happening with the whether it's a rainfall or a temperature. So we have to consider the rainfall, whether it's a pre-monsoon rainfall or unplanned or unforecasted rainfall, or the high temperature in context with the climate change.
Right.
When we say about the climate change, what comes into our mind, and as a scientist, when we write the mathematical equation of the climate change, there are only two variables which are associated with the climate change. One is precipitation, which is water from any source, whether it's a glacier, it's a snow melt, or rainfall. So, and second is the temperature. What we are witnessed, and when we see that we compare with the pre-industrial era with the post-industrial era, the average increase in the temperature is about 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is a huge temperature. And that's why the Paris Accord 2015 came to curtail that temperature. It's the obligation, responsibility of the member state of the United Nations, signed by 191 countries that Paris Accord, and similarly that is also reflected in the Sustainable Development Goals about the one of the goal which is related with the climate action. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, because we are more concerned with our own country, although we are not contribution in terms of the pollution, our contribution is less than 1%,
Yeah.
but the impact is exponential. Why? The main contributors in terms of the pollutions are USA, China, India, European countries, but the impact comes on Pakistan as well, because about 7,300 glaciers are on our considered to be rooftop of the country, and when the temperature rise, the whole ecosystem disturbs. That's why Pakistan is a country which, when we see the climate vulnerability index, climate vulnerability risk index, Pakistan's come in the first 10 countries. Our ranking is the 8th country, and which means it is a huge impact of climate change in Pakistan in context with the precipitation and temperature. And as you were referring to the monsoon, that what we are witness, that the frequency, intensity and the pattern all has been changed in Pakistan for the last couple of years.
And Dr. Saab, you alluded to a very important fact, which is that this region is called the third pole of the world because of the amount of the snow that encapsulates, and because of this rapidly changing and altering weather patterns, we are experiencing extreme weather events, right, like the heat waves, and there's a lot of glaciers that are melting, right, and these glaciers are sort of our source of livelihood, I would say, because the water that is coming from those glaciers, it is our lifeline, right? So I mean, this is happening and we are witnessing, and I don't see a very robust cooperation of the global community on this climate change. So in the backdrop of this entire development, political, economic, social, how can we protect ourselves and make us more climate resilient? Because obviously world is not going to do anything for us.
Two, three things has to be considered in this aspect, what we have to do. That is the most important thing. I think we must have a climate resilient adaptation policy.
True.
And as well as a strategy as well, and it must be of a twofold, one from the international perspective and one from the national perspective. Obviously, when I say climate resilient adaptation strategy, it means we have to develop projects and programs in order to offset that change to the minimal level. Now, it requires a huge investments. It requires a huge investment. From where the money will come? One of the initiative which was taken by Paris Accord and the subsequent meeting, the last meeting was held in UAE, COP28, and in these subsequent meetings, it was decided a green fund has already been created, and that green fund can be capitalized and utilized by those countries which are more vulnerable to the climate change. Although the commitment made by the developed countries for their tangible contribution in that green fund, which is about 100 billion, it's a very peanut amount has been right now is available in that fund. But Pakistan, whatever the financial resources are available, that has to be captured through a very smart move to be undertaken by the Pakistan. Secondly, our any of the development programs in Pakistan must be, obviously Planning Commission is responsible for the socio-economic development, and there is a unit like Sustainable Development Goals unit also exists in Planning Commission. Plus, so all these development programs must be consider and account for the climate change factor into their development programs. Unless until we incorporate that environmental factor in the form of the climate change, it would be very much difficult. Any of the, whether it's a infrastructure development program or any of the program, whether it's a water supply, sanitation, deforestations, whatsoever. So that climate factor must be taken into account, and this is one of the even the advice by the IMF, that our planning cycle must consider the climate factor into their system. So when these two approaches to be applied, I think to some extent we will be able to
but
combat.
Pakistan has a climate change ministry, and it's a ministry that was dedicated to this deal with this issue when, I mean, the world was not even that seriously talking about it, right? And now there's a lot of momentum on the conversation regarding climate change. We do have a ministry, and I do think we have policies, but how can we walk that talk on the climate change? Because the monsoon season is here, right? And Met Office is saying that we are going to receive 35% more intense rainfall. So if there is a urban flooding, there is a flash flooding, you know, how can we can have a more robust what do you call it, system to, you know, tell the people who are vulnerable to these flash flooding?
Because you see, even last year and the year before that, when the floods were really bad,
in 2022.
2022, they said that, okay, we're going to follow some mitigation strategies and we're going to introduce some policies perhaps to mitigate the effects of any such hazardous conditions which may befall Pakistan in the future.
I think it is not only the responsibility of Ministry of Climate Change. Just although the Ministry of Climate Change has developed a climate change policy which has been upgraded by in their subsequent amendments, but it is also the responsibility rests with the provinces as well. For instance, she was referring to the urban flooding. Now,
I think local government should be effective in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, what happened in 2022 floods? What we did, that the pathway from where the river water flows, there was a huge infrastructure was available.
True that.
I mean, so it has to be compatible with the urban policy. It has to be compatible not only at the federal level but at the provincial level, and it must have the respective local government institution must have the capacity, because the district government or the tehsil government or the union council are those institutions which are the core institutions for which are very much relevant with the communities. So, unfortunately in Pakistan, although we do have a respective local government act in all the provinces, but the functional local government system is non-existent, and one of the factor for their non-empowerment, when I say the empowerment of the local government system, it means the political empowerment, financial empowerment, administrative empowerment. All the empowerment has to be done. So, I think provincial governments are reluctant to devolve or deconcentrate their powers to the local government system. So, one of the immediate actions to be taken by the respective, because they can after 18th amendment, which was in the 2010,
yes,
most of the subjects are related with the provincial governments.
Yes,
you can't handle the climate change while sitting in Islamabad. So everything, for instance, our 20% of the 20% of the GDP comes from the agriculture sector.
yes.
So, and about 92% of water is utilized in the agriculture sector. The rest is like 6 to 7% utilized in the municipal drinking and sanitation, and 1%, 1 to 2% in the industry.
True.
And where agriculture exists in the provinces. So, so provincial government has to come in front along with the federal government, because the role of the federal government is more from the international perspective, to keep liaison with the UN system, to by capitalized or जो है ना those opportunities
to
which
coordinate
exist
with
in
them,
in the international systems.
Right, right. And I think, sir, because of the paucity of the time, so now let's quickly move our conversation on the early warning system, right? Like I mentioned that the Met Office is predicting 35% more intense rains. And I think the couple of the rainfall that we received in Islamabad, I've seen, what they were predicting when they were saying that they would be more intense and more infrequent in their occurrence, right? So, sir, what about the early warning system? Do you think as a state we have an effective early warning system, and what sort of conversations we need to have to fill that missing gap?
Before coming to the early warning system, one thing I must
Sure.
mention that in context with the agriculture, our agroclimatic zones are still designed on the traditional rainfall pattern.
I see. I see.
Because that's what which is happening right now. When there is a time of harvesting, there is a rainfall. So one aspect has to be undertaken immediately. We have to redefine our agroclimatic zone in order to enhance our productivity and the yield.
So you mean we haven't still evolved with the evolution of
that
climate.
has to be redefined. Second, your question, which is
regarding early warning system.
Regarding early warning system. Early warning system, do you know what is happening? That one is weather forecasting,
right,
which is related with the early warning system.
Right.
Pakistan Meteorological Department is responsible, and now I think NDMA is also involved in the early warning system. Pakistan Meteorological Department do have their met station at various places. So although, but problem for the early warning system is that whatever the now early warning system predominantly superseded by the climate vulnerability. Whatever we are applying the various climate models, their forecasting is not as accurate because that variability is so much that sometimes it compromises that forecasting. So this is a serious issue that our climate, we have to focus our climate forecasting model.
And you mean the unpredictability has surpassed our scientific methodology?
That's the nature's unpredictability is compromising our scientific interventions. This is what is happening with the climate change. So that's why it's not true for Pakistan. You can see even in the US.
Yes.
It is
a lot of storms have been coming. Yes.
But one thing what we can do, that in the US, what is the difference between the US and in Pakistan? Their communications with the local inhabitants of the communities is very strong.
Yes.
So the casualties are minimal over there. So that
again, warning systems are very strong.
So that area has to be focused. That at least we must face a catastrophe like a 2022 flood, which we are witnessed, that the huge human loss, livestock loss, crop loss, infrastructure loss, a huge loss of $30 billion US dollar. So that has to be focused in our various initiatives to be undertaken in order to minimal effect of the this climate change.
Right. Dr. Sab, well, it's very unfortunate that we are having a lack of time. We would love to get into detail a conversation with you regarding the climate patterns. Obviously, this is something which is need of the hour, but I must thank you for coming here, for contributing and for giving your time to us in our morning show. It's been an absolute pleasure that you came here. Viewers, we will be having more conversations with you. We have a very interesting discussion lined up because climate is something that we have to have a discussion on at every moment that we can, like I said in the beginning of the program. But definitely we're going to talk more about different issues as well. Stay tuned to World This Morning till we come back after a short break. Good morning.
Welcome back, and before going on with the break, we were having a very interesting and fruitful discussion on the pre-monsoon, and we discussed the climatic changes in that. So without further monopolizing my conversation, we now want to discuss regarding rethinking education and how does the concept of the arts fit in as it has the influencing power or the power of the change. So without any further ado, I'm very glad that we have been joined by Professor Zafar Iqbal Saab. He is the HOD, the School of the Arts and Design, Park Austria Institute. Assalamu alaikum, sir, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Right, sir, so it's a very interesting sort of a discussion, rethinking education, and that too in terms of arts and design, because that is your fundamental area of expertise, right? So please tell us that what sort of reshaping you want to occur around this particular area?
Actually, it is not particular to the art and design, but we have to rethink, because you can understand that technology has changed everything.
True.
Now, to my mind, it was because we are coming out of this system, this traditional system of education. And as I remember, that it was about memory test. We were asked questions and we have to kind of ratify those questions.
That's true.
And put them on the paper.
True.
Yes.
And mostly it was about the dates and like that. But fortunately enough, I have taught at NCA for 25 years, and basically over there it was about hands-on thing. Practical things, the studio, we were working in the studio all the time. It was a back-breaking kind of exercise to work hours and hours in the studio.
True.
But we were trained like that.
Okay.
And fortunately enough, now we are talking about internships and industry collaborations. But as a young lecturer back in 1994, when I joined NCA, first thing I did was, because I was coming into education after 7 years of experience, and whatever it was happened to me in the industry, I was like questioning whether this is the right kind of education. Because I'll give you a small example. I always stopped into printing paper. It was theoretical paper.
Right.
And when I went out, and as a designer, I was asked by one of my friends, can you get this letterhead and this visiting card printed for me? He said, yes, I can try. And when I went to the printer, I didn't knew anything about how to go about it.
Right, right.
So this was the major gap, because we were teaching something. I'm not saying that it was all the subjects. Yes, we were taught some practical sides, and that was very the designing practice and all those. But in many areas, we have to go and connect to the industry. And in 1994, first thing I wrote a letter. At that time it was writing letters. So I wrote a letter and sent it to all the advertising agencies, PTV and other channels. There were no other channels at that time, but yes, there were opportunities wherever these were. And they answer back, and they committed, we have a class of 30 or something like 24 students. We needed those students to go to industry, and during the summers I sent them all to the industry. So this was the kind of thinking that was always in my mind. So given the opportunity, I came to Haripur, my ancestral hometown.
Right.
And I was given the opportunity to establish art and design school.
Right.
But it is, as you asked, that it is not particular to the art and design, it is about every education, because we have to rethink. Chat GPT and AI and everything is coming up.
Right.
So how and where do we
Sir,
perceive
now
the students to be there?
Also, we need to discuss the power of arts and how does the concept of the activism fits in that, right? Since you're an expert in the field, and as a layperson, there's a lot of conversation regarding, on the climate change, and in the West we have seen that there's a movement where, climate activists, they're very aggressive in their approach, and they're going to all of these very famous, painting houses or curation centers, and just to grab the attention, they are destroying the very valuable pieces of the work, right? But they're saying that the world is doing nothing against that, right? And many people are labeling them that's vandalizing, right? So how do you think we can build a greater momentum around the activism of any sorts and incorporate arts into that equation?
Actually, this training should start very early from the school time, and then art come later, because you see, we have to think like that. We are now very much aware that this world is very small. It has become like one big country now, and anything happening in reference to environment somewhere 1,000 miles away affects us. So, well, vandalizing and all those are gimmicks. I don't know whether I should say it right and wrong, but in the classroom, like last semester we did exercise. We asked the students to come up with the ideas, how to eradicate these cellophane or plastic bags.
Okay.
Because this is very close to my heart, that this is the environment thing which has to be done. So our class has like 4 groups. They were working together, girls and boys, and they came up with the idea to reuse the newspaper, the old ones, and make some envelopes and paper bags out of that. And they did the whole financial thing as well. And then they move into the community around us in Parkhurst Institute. It's a small village actually. So they found girls and women sitting in home doing nothing. Yes, they are doing something actually. They are part of a family, cooking and all those. But they invited them to trained them how to work on those newspaper. They gave them the newspaper and they paid them something.
Right.
And then they came back to class with the envelopes and with paper bags and redesigned very well. And then they decided how to market those papers. So it was a whole exercise.
Right.
And last month I was in Austria to meet our partners, because you see we have a Park Austria Institute, so we have our partners out there.
Right.
And every year our top 2 students are going. So we were talking to them.
Right.
And we came up with the idea that we should work on women entrepreneurship.
Right.
Again, I feel that because this question was asked by my daughter, she was very young, and she has 3 brothers and she was the youngest. She asked me, Baba, why are rules different from us and from for the boys it's different? Because whenever they want they can go out, and whatever they want they get it, and girls are like, so it's very close to my heart that the women entrepreneurs should be always can make a change.
And
so,
we have been talking a lot about that too in our programs. One thing that comes to mind when we talk about rethinking education, and like we said that we should not limit the scope of talking about only art and culture, we should also be talking about other aspects as well. Now there is a scope of innovation, there is a lot of scope of creativity when it comes to art. But when it comes to the other subjects, the AI, don't you think that's taking over the overall capacity of the brains of students to be creative and innovative? Because they are copying things off of the internet, they are copying things off of the AI helping tools, etc. Even if they have to pay for it, they would go for it, and then it even becomes difficult for teachers, Hajra teachers. I have taught at one period of my life, I did. But at that time, they didn't have AI. It was easier for me. But Hajra would relate to how difficult now it is.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think we have to learn to live with those AI tools, right?
Yes. Actually, we have to adopt those. You see, we have a complete department of AI. So, there's another company, IT-based company, who is working on game and animation as well. They approach us, and they have come up with the idea that art and design, department of AI and the industry should work together. Because you see, for example, for the image generation, I've seen those images which you were talking about. I was invited by a university, I don't name that university, and every student has one painting which was like very similar. Because you see, AI will not do anything until the prompts are right. Because you see, so the software is there.
You need to ask the right question,
So the company thought that, okay, AI department is there, but for the image generation or the character design, art and design is the best persons. So we were together doing a workshop. We were learning AI, students and teachers, because we can give them the right prompts to. You see, it's about storytelling. All art and design is about storytelling, and we have our international partners, but be aware that we are leading in art and design because we have a culture of 8,000 years old.
True.
And you see that helps us because
Gives us an edge.
yeah.
Yes.
So this AI thing we need to adopt. We need to adapt, but how to use that? I've seen those letters. I still don't use it, by the way.
That's good.
I write
Yeah.
my things, and
Yes.
because those things has emotions to it.
Yes.
But what I think at the moment, I don't know for the future, but when you see the AI thing, you see it's not connecting. It is not connecting at the moment.
It does not have a soul to it.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
it, what you're talking about. And so, sir, now let's move forward to another interesting conversation. And since you are teaching at the bachelor's level and probably at the graduate level, so let's focus on the critical thinking and the pedagogical skills.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are at the university level teaching our students the critical thinking skills, and there's entire Frankfurt School which is connected to the critical thinking school. So, what are the gaps, some of the gaps that you find as a professor are there when we are talking about the critical thinking skills, and what sort of conversations do we need to have?
And to add on to that, sir, don't you think the concept of critical thinking should start at a very early age?
That was my answer, because you see, when the students are coming to us,
Right.
they are like exercise number
Oh yes,
8, exercise number 10, done.
they are ratasized
Okay.
that, yeah.
So critical thinking should start at the kindergarten level. The small, because you see the mental development is very fast at that small age. Not even in the colleges, but in the early schooling, they should be allowed to question. Because you see, what I remember from the school is that Miss is coming with this ruler and tuck, 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 no talking, finger on the lips. So
Yes.
finger on the lips is all I remember from a kindergarten time.
Teacher-centric,
Because
yeah.
you see, finger on the lips means don't talk. So when we are starting with don't talk, how can you imagine that we will allow our children to develop this critical thinking skills? And when they come to this profession institute, and it is not lecturing, it is interactive arrangement. We ask them to start. And you see, even when I go to the class, we sit in the circle. We don't, because you see, facing someone means he is the wise man and other are there to listen. No, we are not there to lecture, and they are not there to
So, sir,
listen.
now since we're talking that the concept of critical thinking is not instilled in the children since the early ages, when you start off with your classes at the university level, how difficult do you find it for the students to grab that concept and to actually be interactive with the teacher?
Well, you see, when I started teaching, I told you in 1994, this was the main question, because these things were troubling me because nobody was asking questions. So now we are ready for it because we know where they are coming from, doing their intermediate exams for the bachelor's and maybe some bachelor's coming to the master's program. So first 2 weeks are like general talking. There is no subjects involved. We were talking to each other, what they like to eat, what they so somehow in their own interest, because everybody eats. So I like curry, I like, so it starts coming out. It starts coming out.
That's an ice-breaking session.
Yeah.
right?
So for 2 weeks at least, we are not talking about the subject. We are talking about the students, what they like, what they don't like. So gradually they start speaking, and then it becomes difficult to stop them speaking. So because we tell them everybody, everything is questionable. Even to my mind, it is very clear that we can always have opinion about science as well. Because you see, who knows what we were taught about physics or chemistry, it is changing as well.
It is
changing.
changing.
It is changing.
The universe is changing.
The universe
yes.
is changing. So new things are coming up.
True.
So first thing is let them talk. Let them talk.
True.
Like a toddler, when will he talk? When will she talk? When she start talking,
Then we tell them to be quiet.
So please, at that age, at small age, don't tell them to finger on the lips.
And even
Let them come out.
you mentioned the teachers. What about the parents? What I mean, what do you suggest all the new parents that they should be doing with their children? Should they be allowed to talk all the time and chit chatter all the time in the house?
Well,
even when you have a headache.
well, yes, because you have given the answer, and it is about the training coming
Right.
starting from the home and coming to the school. Well, I'm not believer the way the schools are working, that they should do it for centuries like the same thing. Now the trends are changing. The young parents, they are not sending their children to the school. I know few very learned parents, both of them professionals. They do the homeschooling, because you see, what are we teaching at the school? I don't want to criticize the whole system, but it is like that. You have to change the whole system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, at the professional level, we have to struggle. I don't mind that. I
think that's a very interesting debate about homeschooling versus schooling, and I'm not in the favor of particularly the homeschooling, but I think we will save that debate for some other time. But thank you so much, Professor Saab, for coming here, for having this wonderful cross-pollination of the ideas regarding the arts, regarding the culture, design, and the power to change and influence, and that too in terms of rethinking our educational patterns and education system. Thank you once again for coming here, for having this wonderful conversation and discussion. And with that, we will end up our show. Until next time, it's a goodbye, Allah Hafiz, and good morning.
Thank you.